Hello everyone, welcome to the first full-length episode of Basecamp, a climbing magazine podcast, where we bring you exclusive interviews with a wide range of personalities from our sport. I'm your host, Kevin Riley. Our first interview is with Heather Weidner, who is most notably known for her first female ascent of China Doll, a 514A trad route in Upper Dream Canyon, Colorado. Recently, she teamed up with Climbing Magazine and Arno Ilgner of Rock Warriors Way to produce The Art of Redpointing, an online class that will be released on August 6th on climbing.com. We talked about why redpointing is important, who would benefit from the class, and Heather reveals a few of her own personal tips. Then we have an interview with young climbing phenom and climbing media up-and-comer Matty Hong. He was the fourth American to climb 515B when he climbed Fight or Flight in Oleana, Spain. He also had his film Break On Through, about Margo Hayes' ascent of La Rambla, featured in the hugely popular Real Rock film tour. When we sat down, we talked about growing up with prolific climbing parents, what climbing 515B means to him, how he balances being a climber and photographer and videographer, and how he sees his professional climbing career evolving over time. But first, a word from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by the Access Fund, a not-for-profit rock climbing advocacy group whose mission is simple: to keep climbing areas open and to promote an ethic of responsible climbing and conservation of the climbing environment. Recently, I got to go climbing with Brady Robinson, outgoing executive director of the organization, and ask him what he's most proud of accomplishing over the 11 years at the Access Fund.
When I started, we only had about 3 people who were really focused on the actual work of climbing access. We have 15 now. And so, our budget has nearly tripled in size, but I would say our effectiveness has increased much more so. And so not only do we have more people out in the world working on conservation, stewardship, and access, but we've got them all around the country. A number of years ago, I was staring at the wall in my office in Boulder, Colorado, and I asked myself, if I asked the community, okay, we're gonna hire somebody else, should we jam one more person in Boulder, Colorado, or should we put them somewhere else out in the world? What do you think most climbers would say?
Yeah, not in Boulder.
Not in Boulder.
Out of the bubble.
That's right. Our kind of reputation was being a little Boulder-centric.
Sure.
And so now we've got staff scattered all over the country, Southeast, Northeast, California, Pacific Northwest. One guy lives in his van, Arizona, Texas. Our footprint and our relevancy has increased hugely. And just like politics, almost all access issues are local. And if you've got someone on the ground who knows the players, who knows the volunteers, you can get a lot more done.
Yeah.
I'm incredibly proud of that. And we've just created a really professional and fun group of people. And it makes it a pleasure to come to work every day.
See how you can get involved at accessfund.org. Yep. Hey Heather, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good. How's your summer going?
Man, it's been awesome. I've actually been trying to get at elevation. I was at Wizards Gate near Estes Park yesterday because I'm going to Peru to go sport climbing with a couple girlfriends in a week.
Oh, sweet. Who are you going with?
I'm going with my friend Elizabeth and my Peruvian friend Sandra, who I've both known from climbing around the Vegas area when I used to live there. So
cool.
It'll be sweet.
How long are you going to be there for?
2 weeks.
Awesome.
Yeah,
awesome.
But it's crazy because the sport climbing is at 13,500 feet.
Oh my gosh.
So that'll be different for me. I don't tend to get up at altitude very much. It's
Well, it's a good time of the year. It's been so hot here in Boulder and pretty much across the country.
Yeah, it's been great. And Chris, took me up to Hallett Peak and we did a cool route up there. And yeah, it's been nice to do some different stuff,
Yeah, I think I saw an Instagram photo of him. You guys were on like some 5-6.
We were on this 5-8 called the Northcut Carter, which is interesting because it's one of the 50 classic North American routes. But interestingly, in 1999, the first 2 pitches fell off. So you have to kind of contrive it now. We come in from the climbers, right? But yeah, it was adventurous. It was like a cool historic route, put up in the 50s. yeah, it was a great time.
So I want to talk to you about this project you're working on with Climbing Magazine. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Yeah, so it's pretty neat. I have this online course coming out that I'm co-instructing with Arno Ilgner of the Rock Warriors Way, and it's called The Art of Redpointing. And it's all online. It comes out August 6th.
Okay.
And basically, it goes through everything you need to know how to red point your best. So how are you going to get through your project? And I've personally worked with Arno now for the past year and a half because I was dealing with some kind of mental issues around projecting, particularly after red pointing China Doll, this 514 in Dream Canyon here in Boulder. I kind of went into this like post-depressive red pointing slump, and I just ran into Arno at OR 2 years ago, and he's was like, hey, I'd love to pick your brain of how you project these tough routes, and in return like give you some mental training. So it's cool. I've actually experienced the mental training myself with Arno, and now working together, putting together this course. It's like we're going to give you all of the tips and tricks of the trade.
Now, is this for everybody, or is this just people who are climbing 514 trad?
Yeah,
hard stuff.
Honestly, I think it's for most everyone. I would say it's not for the super duper beginner.
Sure.
We also have an intro to sport climbing course that would be better for them. But
okay.
This is more for the climber that, maybe they've kind of hit a little bit of a plateau and they're wondering, how do I break through to the next level? Or maybe it's just like the climber that's been climbing a little while and they want to improve their skills both mentally and physically. We have some training tips on there and mental tips that will help with basically all types of climbers and all types of climbing, from bouldering to trad climbing, and from the beginning end to upper end.
As far as like red pointing, do you think that's important for most climbers to get better? I remember seeing Chris Sharma talking on some video, and he was like, you just need to get out there and climb. But whenever I just get out there and climb, I don't get better. I'm like on this like constant plateau. So do you think something like this would help me out, someone struggling to improve?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was in the same boat years ago. I used to just go out and climb, just for quote unquote fun. And I didn't see the value in red pointing. Like, I just went climbing.
Yeah.
But it's so cool because red pointing allows you to get so much more involved in the sport. And I think it's so fun because you learn all of the intricacies and you become like, you have this intimate relationship with your climb versus just going climbing. And certainly I think involving these tips that we have in the course can help you kind of break through into that next level. And not only will it help you become a more competent climber, but also it will just in general like help you become more peaceful with yourself.
Interesting.
I think honestly, when I go out climbing, like at Rifle and where everyone has a project, the most common thing I see is people getting really frustrated.
Sure, I see that all the time. A lot of screaming going on at Rifle. A lot of cursing on the cliff.
They're falling at the same move, over and over again. And we have this section of the course. It's called Succeeding with Failure, and it talks about the 7 different ways that are most common, I guess, for people to fail on their project. And it'll kind of go through not only like why we do that, but then some tips and some actual concrete things of what you can do to break through.
And is training a big part of the class?
It is, but I think what the bigger kind of focus is on the mental aspect, because if you go online or you go into a gym, you have every fingerboarding and campusing routine at your fingertips, but what I think our sport is really lacking is the mental training.
Sure.
Yeah.
And what I've noticed too a lot with the Rock Warriors Way is a lot of the stuff you can work on is actually off of the rock.
Absolutely.
It's not during the climbing, it's the things that you're doing when you're at home doing goal setting and trying to figure out exactly what you want and what you're comfortable with.
Definitely. And one of the biggest things that's really helped me working with the Warriors Way is getting into in tune with my motivation and why I'm actually climbing. And sure, we all set goals and we want to send hard. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I guess just realizing that's okay, but we can't know when we're going to achieve that goal. Mm-hmm. And so coming back to our motivation and saying, are we doing this just for the achievement? Yeah. Is that all we want? Or is it more like you want to learn? And so for me, it's all about now like curiosity, and that helps me redpoint better, because I'm like, why did I fall? Not just like I fell and I'm so frustrated and I'm never going to do this.
And when that does happen, when you do get super frustrated, what do you end up kind of doing to remove yourself from that negative energy?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it still comes up, right? You know, of course I get frustrated just like the other person, but I think what I've learned over the past couple years is I'm able to recognize it. That's the first thing, is having this awareness, like, ooh, I'm getting frustrated, and then take a moment, be able to kind of take a deep breath, let it out, and then shift your attention back to the task at hand. So instead of letting yourself go into this, what I call and Arno calls a power sink, where you're allowing these thoughts to just go into a deeper level of frustration, instead shifting that into, okay, why did I fall? Like, maybe I can change my foot here, or maybe I can shift my hips so that, I'm going to be closer to the wall, or whatever it is that you're working on.
Great. And final question. So you guys shot this over at Staunton State Park here in Colorado. Yeah. And you mentioned you shot it with Arno and yourself, and I believe Matt Samet was there.
Yes.
Were there any fun antics going on during the shooting?
We had so much fun. That crew is amazing. We had a crew of about half a dozen people, and it was just great. Like, it was long days of filming and whatnot, but it was fun getting out. I got out with Matt and Kevin and Arno, and we stayed late, and we all went climbing, and it was so much fun. We're tired, it's at altitude, but we had a blast, and Sam and I had ascent train, so that was fun.
All right. Well, make sure you guys check it out. It's The Art of Red Pointing, coming out on August 6th with Heather Widener and the crew.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much. Take care. All right. There's our conversation with Heather Widener. And again, you can check out The Art of Red Pointing starting on August 6th at climbing.com. And our next interview with Matty Hong. It was a good one. I think you guys are going to really enjoy it. So I'm just going to get right to it. Here you go, Matty Hong. So you're just back from Spain after climbing Fight or Flight 515B. How does it feel to be home?
It feels great to be home. It always feels good to return back to Colorado after a long trip. 2 months abroad is kind of where I draw the line, and where I start to want to reset and come back, start training, get back in the normal routine of things, and then think about the next project.
Yeah. And do you go to Spain a lot, or was this your first trip, or have you been there a bunch of times?
This was my third year in a row going to Spain.
Okay.
So I went first in 2016 and went for 3 months, did the whole 3-month visa, and then got hooked and just kind of got a taste of everything that there is over there. And then I've been going every year since. Maybe next year I'll take a year off, just because I got this big goal accomplished, and there's so many other places I want to go. So maybe next year go somewhere else. But
yeah, what are you thinking? Do you have anything?
I don't know. I mean, there's so much. There's a lot on the list right now, so we'll see.
So you grew up in a climbing family. Your dad, Steve Hong, a very accomplished climber, still continuing to put up hard routes out in Rifle. Your mom climbed quite a bit. And what was it like growing up in a climbing family, and how were you introduced to climbing?
I'm pretty lucky to have parents that are climbers, and growing up in a family with climbers was great, because I got to be exposed to a lot of different climbing areas at a young age. I wasn't just confined to a climbing gym. I was actually able to go on trips with my parents, and before I even started climbing, I would just go with them and play around in the dirt, swing on the ropes. I got kind of sucked into that lifestyle pretty early on, which I'm grateful for. And now my dad is still climbing. My mom has kind of slowed down climbing, but she still is really outgoing and athletic. She rides her bike a lot, so that's inspiring to me in a different way. Like she's still going hard and getting after it, going on trips to go biking now. But they've been probably the biggest influence in my climbing, I would say, with no doubt, just because of all they've allowed for me to grow as a climber. They've really helped me, whether that's going on trips or just like supporting me going to competitions or whatever. Like they've been a huge influence in my climbing.
And beyond just the logistics, what else do you think you've really learned, like certain traits from your mother and father?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of what I've learned is like the mentality and kind of ethics for my climbing. My parents both kind of grew up before climbing was a thing, and they were establishing first ascents, trad routes, and there wasn't really a standard set for climbing or for what a climber even looks like. So they kind of they didn't do it they did it for different reasons, I think, than a lot of people get into climbing now. And that's more just to be outside, to push themselves in different ways, and just to like, because they were passionate and enjoyed the sport. And I think that's something that I've kind of taken from them as a token that, maybe not a lot of people get to see, just like the essence of why people climb, rather than maybe the materialistic side, or not just like the goal driven side. Like they've always kept me humble is what I'm trying to say. And just like to enjoy the sport. And if I'm not having fun, maybe take a step back and kind of reconsider what I'm doing.
And when you were first introduced to climbing, which sounds like it was quite early, did it take right away? Were you into it?
I don't think I was. When I was younger, I did a lot of different activities with school, and like outside of school, I played soccer growing up. I played tennis, and I was swimming for a little bit. And I think they never prioritized climbing for me over other sports. I think I kind of made that decision my own when I was around 13 to 15. I kind of like transitioned to okay, I'm gonna be a climber. Like I don't want to do all these other sports anymore. I just want to focus on climbing. So.
And why was that?
I think it was a lot of, the other sport that I was kind of going in the direction of was playing soccer. I played for 8 or 9 years growing up, and a lot of my friends kept doing that throughout high school. But I think what drew me away from that was the competitiveness of it, and it was all just like practice. And then, I don't know, it wasn't as rewarding for me as like going out climbing and maybe sending something or just having a good day climbing. Like that's still to me a greater feeling than it was when I was younger, at least like winning a game with a team or something. I don't know. It just, eventually it drew me in more, I guess. Yeah, I don't know all the factors of it, but.
And it sounds like you weren't real competitive when you were younger with climbing, and maybe still not that competitive. Is that true?
I think I'm definitely competitive. Like I would say any athlete that's trying to like climb their hardest thing, or just like, even if it's, I don't know, I take sports very seriously. Like I don't follow sports all the time, and like I'm not watching the comp circuits. Like I'm not competitive in that sense, but I definitely push myself as hard as I can whenever I can. And I find inspiration from other people around me that are, maybe they're climbing harder than me, or maybe, they're just training harder than me. But like, I definitely get a drive from that, from the people around me. So I'm competitive for sure, but I'm not competitive in a way where it kind of like creates a different feeling around what I'm doing, like it's not going to put me in a bad mood or something. It's just it's either going to fuel me and fire me up, or I'm not going to really care about it. Yeah.
And you have a brother, Alex, is that correct?
Yeah. I have a older brother who lives in California.
Okay. And he used to climb, but doesn't climb anymore.
Right. He started around the same age as I did, and he kind of took a different path when he was getting into high school, so maybe around like 14 or 15.
Mm-hmm.
And we were competitive together for sure.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
That might have been part of the reason why he took a different route, because we were around like climbing at the same level, you know. It was like give or take, he'd have a good day or I'd have a good day, but it was pretty like butting heads a little bit.
Yeah.
And maybe that was a reason why he took a different route. I think he had issues with heights, which is kind of a problem in climbing, and maybe he didn't want to really try to get over those because he wanted to do something else.
Mm-hmm.
But
So I'm interested in why you put up new routes. You mentioned that your dad has put up lots of new routes and, you know, Rifle and Indian Creek. It's kind of unusual for someone your age to be putting up new routes, especially like a pro climber your age. There's not a lot of people like you. Why do you think you are putting up new routes, and why do you enjoy it?
Well, I definitely want to put up more routes, and I've only put up a handful, and I feel like I still have a lot to learn in that realm. And that's one thing that I definitely want to focus on this year is developing more of my own climbs. But I think maybe it seems unusual, but like my dad has been so persistent in the developing climbing world that like it's almost expected of me to kind of like carry that torch in a sense. He's been bolting for 20 plus years, you know, and he's a great teacher, and he has the tools for me to learn. So I think it was definitely more accessible for me as a young climber, you know, than it is for most people. Like it's hard to get out and go learn how to bolt something by yourself, and especially if you don't have a drill or bolts or the proper equipment, it's much more challenging. So I think just him doing it was just a door for me to kind of step into, and was, you know, it's something that I've learned is a really rewarding feeling, and it's a different process than it is to just go climb a project or something. Like going and bolting it can be harder than actually climbing it. So you kind of get to see a different aspect of the sport, which I've learned to really enjoy. Yeah.
You definitely have learned a lot from your parents. Do you think you also got a genetic advantage from your parents as a climber? Or do you think you've had to work just as hard as everyone else?
I mean, whether or not it's genetic or I don't know, I think just being around them has kind of given me an advantage, because they're both very self-motivated people, and they constantly like to be doing something, whether it's, you know, just anything. They're like very active. So I think that has kind of worn off on me. Like if I were just sitting around and maybe not using my time the best, like they would kind of push me a little harder to get off the couch or something like that. So I think whether or not it's genetic, their mentality has kind of worn off on me in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now I want to talk about fight or flight.
All right.
So why that climb?
So Oleana is kind of like the center for the hard sport climbing in the world, I would say. It's one of the most concentrated walls in the entire world for hard climbing. It has, you know, a dozen 515s just right next to each other. So I went there in 2016, and I climbed my first 515A, Papi Chulo. And that kind of opened the doors for me to just like what maybe I was capable of, and oh, maybe I should try more 515s. Like this is something that I can do. So I came back in 2017 and I did 2 515s, and I had a little bit of time left in my trip, and I was satisfied with how I'd climbed last year, and I figured I should get on something hard and maybe size it up for another return visit. And fight or flight has always been kind of like this crown jewel of Oleana. It's a really aesthetic line. It has really good movement, and it's notoriously difficult. It doesn't have a lot of ascents. And
yeah, from watching it, can you tell me about the two different cruxes? Because it seems like it's made up of like a lower crux with like a left-hand bump.
Yeah.
And then it's got that obviously like that upper dynamic move.
Yeah, so the route is pretty short. It's pretty compact. It's mainly broken down into like, I would say 3 boulder problems.
Okay.
it's short for Oleana standards.
Sure.
It's still probably like 30 to 35 meters long, but everything at Oleana is like 40 meters. So it seems short, and since it's so bouldery, you climb it fast. So you're not on the wall for very long, which is another thing that I liked about the route. So the route starts with you climb a slab, and you can kind of stand at the end of the slab and in a no hands and kind of get ready, psych yourself up for what is to come pretty intense climbing. And you do a long opening boulder problem that's not super difficult, but it's resistant and you can't chalk up or anything. I'd say it's maybe V11. And then you get to a quick position where you can clip, and then you immediately enter what is the crux of the route. And this is maybe a hard V11 or V12 boulder problem that revolves around a super dynamic, low percentage bump with the left hand. And I fell on this move countless times. Like, I don't know how many times I would get there feeling okay and then just be a little too tired or not have the accuracy I needed to stick that move. So there's a lot of things that came into factor for that crux. And when I tried it last year, I never made it through that crux. I only tried the route for like 2 weeks, but I couldn't get through that crux. So this trip around, I kind of trained for that route and I knew what to expect. So
any specific training?
Yeah, I knew that it was a really resistant route. So I knew that I had to do like hard boulders, but not like really intense single moves, but more just like consistent power endurance climbing. So I would do circuits on V11, V10 boulder problems just to prepare myself for like to climb confidently on like a lot of hard moves in a row.
Yeah.
But there wasn't any specific. I did try and set that boulder problem in the gym, the Crux, but it's never quite the same.
Yeah.
And it's more just like fun to do that than anything else. Like, I don't know how beneficial that is, but I tried to train as much as I could. Like, I knew that this route was going to be my goal of the trip, and I didn't really have any other focus going over there. So I wanted to train specifically for this and then try and do this, and that was the goal. And normally I've kind of gone with loose goals on trips, you know, like, oh, I want to try this route, or there's a couple things that I have my eyes on. But like, this was something that I was really, it was like kind of the first time that I really focused on climbing a single route like that. So should I keep telling you about the route?
Yeah, I would love to hear more about the route. Sorry.
No worries.
I'm just real interested. I have a bunch of questions.
You do the second crux, and then you get this bad rest on 2 crimps. And this is like the only place where you can stop and chalk up on the whole route. You can't even really drop your hands and shake anywhere else on the route. So it's cool because you climb really intense for like 7 or 8 bolts, and then you stop and you chill on 2 little crimps, and then it's just like power to the top from there. So I like how it's broken down into 2 big sections. And from this rest, you probably climb an 8C route, a 14B to the top, but I would also break it down as maybe a long V11 with a all points off, or not all points, but a full dyno at the end to the biggest jug you could ever imagine on maybe the best hold on the entire wall. But it's this pretty crazy dynamic move that finishes the route, and it's pretty perfect. It would be hard to set a route that's like as good as that one.
How many times do you think you got on that route before sending it?
Oh, I probably tried the route, like red point tries. I probably tried it 25 times, about like red points where I thought, okay, maybe I can try and send the route this time. Maybe 20 to 25 times. Like, it was a lot. It was 2 weeks of trying the route in 2017, but not necessarily giving red point tries. It was more just figuring out the moves and setting it up for this year. And then this year, it was roughly 6 weeks of trying the route, give or take like some bad weather and rest days. Like, it's not 6 weeks straight, but it was a lot of tries. Like, it was the goal of the trip. So I didn't really climb on other stuff until I had sent that route. And so every day I was at the cliff, I was either trying that route or I was resting and shooting photos or doing something else. But that was the singular focus.
So after the ascent, I saw a photo of you drinking a celebratory drink out of your climbing shoe. Yeah. Where did you get that idea? Had you seen someone do that before?
No, that was a friend of mine, Felipe, this Brazilian climber. He's really into pretty much all sports, and he was saying that a lot of car racers, I don't know if it's motocross or NASCAR or whatever, but they drink champagne out of their shoe.
Oh, really?
So it was kind of like this joke. It was this joke that he made where he was like, if you sent, because he actually brought a bottle of champagne up to the route like weeks before I climbed it. So we kind of joked about maybe one day I'll drink it, maybe not, maybe we should open it now or whatever. But it was his idea to drink out of the shoe. And he kind of joked. He was like, if you send, you got to drink out of the shoe. And I was just like, if I send, I'll do whatever. Like, I'll be so psyched. I'll drink out of a shoe, no problem. So that was kind of the joke. And then as soon as I sent, he ripped it off my foot and like poured champagne into it.
How'd that taste?
It was
earthy.
Yeah, it was kind of on cloud nine at that point. So I didn't really get it. Yeah.
So I read an interview you did with Chris Widener a while ago for the Daily Camera, just saying that, well, you said that, your dad has left a mark in the climbing world and you wanted to do the same. Do you think this route, climbing, fight or flight, is that mark you were looking for? Or is there still a lot more out there for you?
There's definitely still a lot more out there for me. I think my dad and I have definitely left different marks. His mark is definitely more obvious. It's like he's put up so many first ascents. He has his name like behind all these routes. I've kind of done it more as like established myself as maybe a strong climber, and maybe I've made my mark and but it's more temporary, like I definitely want to go put up my own first ascents. And I think that's what I meant when I was talking to Chris Widener was my dad's left his mark, he's left behind these tokens for people to kind of pick up and experience. And that's what I would like to do in the sense of leaving my mark. Like I definitely want to inspire people. And if what I'm doing is leaving my mark in that sense, then that's great. But I want to have like the physical, here are the routes that I put up for other people, or, like I want that kind of a mark.
Yeah. So there's been a wave of Americans sending 515B recently. It seems like.
Shout out to Jonathan Segris, who just did Jumbo Low.
Yeah, it's incredible. Why do you think that's happening now?
I think it's just the progression in climbing. I think that this is going to be the norm. Like 515A has seen more and more ascents in the past 4 or 5 years than ever, and now that's not as big of a surprise when people climb 515A. And that's like 10 years ago, there were only a couple people.
Sure.
It's like it's changing. Our sport is changing pretty fast, and people are just getting better and better. And I think also that there's more people climbing 515s, that more people are going to start trying them. They're going to be like a little more inspired to get on these hard routes. And like, if they hear a story about someone working a route for months or years, they're going to be like, oh, I could try something that's going to take me that much time. Or maybe I'm not, I think that's kind of been little inspiration for people to try hard routes. And then people are getting surprised, like, oh, I can do these, if I put in the time. But it's the progression of our sport, I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I want to switch gears a little bit, talk about your photography and videography a little bit. You mentioned while you were in Spain, you were also taking photos. Were you doing video there as well?
Yeah, I did. I did shoot a lot of film over there, and I'm still in the process of editing. We're doing maybe you guys have seen it. It's called Perspective. It's a episodic thing for Petzl that's getting released. There's still 2 more episodes that are to come out, and then a film kind of tying them all together. And it's a bunch of individual films about different athletes. So I was shooting that over in Spain, and also just shooting a bunch of photos as much as I could.
How do you balance the photography and the climbing? Because they both take so much energy and so much dedication.
Yeah, it's hard, and it's getting harder and harder now that I'm kind of getting more into these bigger film projects. It's becoming like a bigger task and more work. But it's not easy, like balancing I think a lot of it is when I'm climbing like a route like fight or flight, and I need to save every ounce of energy for a chance of sending. Like it's hard for me to balance sometimes even carrying up like my big camera to shoot video, because it's heavy, like
Sure.
sometimes I'm just like, I just want to leave this behind so I can save energy and maybe today send. And then also jugging ropes and shooting can be tricky just because jugging lines is super tiring, and especially when you're trying things that are at your limit. But I think the way I've kind of come to balance it is that I don't know. It's hard to explain what goes on in my head when I'm like, okay, it's okay to jug that rope this time. Like, I think a lot of reward that I get comes from like getting a good shot, whether it's like a real emotion or like a photo that I'm happy with. Like I get super happy when I kind of nail a shot, or it's a rewarding feeling that, maybe if I just had gotten up my project and like one hung it or something, like the reward that I'm getting from climbing in photography or video is kind of balancing out in some sense. I'm still a climber first.
Sure.
But like if I miss a shot, I beat myself up. Or like if I don't jug a line and someone sends the route and has a great reaction or something and I miss that, like that's a super... I get super down. Like I'm just like, oh, why didn't you jug the route? Like you were lazy or something like that.
Yeah,
so.
It seems like you really like capturing those rare moments before and after the climb of climbers. You're really good at that.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that's the best part of climbing photography for me. Like there's definitely the spectacular shots where it's just like landscapes and composition is great. The lighting's great. Like that has like a certain appeal to it.
Sure.
But I think like there's so much emotion bottled up in climbers, just stress and anxiety, and then also just like excitement and nerves and stuff like that, that it's easy to capture those if you're on point and you're kind of just like waiting and those moments are coming. Like if I ever see someone send a route that I know they've been working on, or I think they're going to have a genuine reaction like of happiness or something, then I'll try to be ready for that.
I feel like we should talk about the Margo Hayes photo
Sure.
that you had. It's a beautiful photo.
Thank you.
It feels like the whole experience was just real emotional.
Yeah. I mean, I think that kind of opened the door also for for like the other side of climbing photography for me. Like before, maybe I didn't see those small little reactions or those emotions as I do now. Like I think I've definitely kind of become more aware to like how people feel about climbing after that moment. But yeah, taking that photo, it was a special moment for sure. Like I was belaying her and she got to the anchor and she was like yelling down to me to lower her. But I was like, I wasn't lowering her. I was like rifling through my camera bag, like putting on the right lens and like making sure that I was going to be ready for when she gets down. And then I only took like, I think there's only 3 photos of that one shot that you see, that like the one shot that kind of went viral. I think I only took a couple photos and then like some before and after of that moment. But it was just like, take the quick photo and then kind of be in the moment with her and with everyone else. And it was definitely a special time.
So where do you plan on taking your photography and videography professionally? And where do you see you kind of taking your career as a climber and photographer and artist?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say, but I think there's definitely more room for me to grow as a videographer or a photographer. Like I have so much to learn on that realm, and I feel maybe professionally too, like my career might end up going in that direction when I'm older, when I'm not wanting to go to Spain for 2 months and climb one route. Like I don't think I'm going to want to do that forever, because it's just exhausting. And it's more, I love making films and taking photos because I like to share them with people, and I like to like take these moments and kind of just like give people a taste of them. And that's like it feels good when they're well received, or just, I don't know. I feel like climbing films in general have a lot grow, a lot of room to grow. So I hope to, kind of bring a new perspective, if that's from a climber's point of view or whatever that is.
Yeah, it seems like you have kind of a more artistic style to your videography, at least. I was watching one of your videos and I was like, this looks like if Boone Speed made a video.
Nice, yeah.
It was one of the black and white ones, obviously. But...
Nice, yeah. I think that's also because I'm still learning how to edit, and I'm still learning like how to tell a story. So a lot of times I just kind of fall back on like, oh, this is a pretty shot. Let's like bring up the music a little bit and like let it play out. But definitely with the film that I just did of Margo, I learned a lot, and that was kind of like a big turning point in my filmmaking career. Just the fact that I went from making these little climbing videos for YouTube or for sponsors for, not just like small budgets, to kind of getting dumped this big Real Rock piece. And that was like a really aggressive learning curve, but at the same time, it was the coolest experience I've had.
Did it feel stressful at the time?
Yeah, I mean, for sure there was a lot of pressure, and just a lot of it was very new to me, like making a film that was going to be played in festivals or being toured around, or like there's a lot of different turning parts that kind of come together there. But yeah, it was stressful. We definitely worked on the film until the last day. But with, I worked with Pete Mortimer, Nick Rosen, Zach Barr, and a little bit with Josh Lowell and Brett Lowell. And those guys have, they've been killing it for years.
Yeah, there's no one better to learn from.
No, yeah, it was incredible to just sit next to them at the computer and just kind of watch how they approach things, or whether it was me turning in an edit for them to review and then them just tearing it apart and just basically saying, this is great, but why don't you start over and try again? Like that was monumental for my videography.
Yeah, and it almost seems like you need somebody to do that for you, because you're not going to just throw out your own work on your own. Yeah. Or it's going to take a lot more.
Well, I mean, I was kind of throwing out my own work just because I was making these small little climbing films of my friends. Like we'd go out and shoot and edit something, but just the scale of the Margo film was, like it's being seen by thousands and thousands of people. Like it needs to be fine tuned to a different degree. It needs to be for a wider audience. Like, how do you tell a climbing story to someone who doesn't even know what climbing is? Like, we were thinking about different things than I normally would if I'm just making like here's my buddy climbing in Spain or something, So it was cool to kind of approach it from a more commercial look, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So did you go to CU Boulder? Is that correct?
I did, yeah. And I studied film.
You studied film. So, has that helped you out throughout all of this?
Yeah, it has, but we studied, it's not technically a film school. They have a film program, but I did learn a lot about the film production side of things, and also film theory and film history. And I think have become inspired by these films that I watched in school and learned about in school. And I think that I'm trying to draw from those and kind of bring that into the climbing world. So it helps me for sure. It's like I'm really happy I went to school and took the time. I also took a lot of classes that weren't related to film, which, I just think learning about different things is good, just like having knowledge is knowledge is power, like.
So climbers, photographers, videographers, or otherwise, who inspires you these days? Or what inspires you?
Well, I definitely get inspired easily, I would say. And I think like the amount of strong climbers these days is definitely, it's easy to find motivation in the climbing world, whether there's more people to go try hard stuff with, or just there's, it seems like every month something big happens in climbing, or every other month there's like big news. And that's easy for me to draw inspiration from. And I guess in the climbing photography and videography world, like it's really cool to see films like the Dawn Wall coming out, and films like the Jimmy's Honold film. Just seeing how climbing films are becoming so mainstream, that gives me hope as like a wannabe climbing videographer. You know, like I would love to be doing what they're doing someday. And it's really cool to see a wider audience kind of latch on to our sport.
Sure. So in the media, there's been a lot of controversy around the whole Joe Kinder and Sasha Jajilian episode. We don't need to go through all the details here, but it seems that as climbers as a whole, we could be doing a lot better. Pro climbers, non-pro climbers. What do you see in our community that we could all be working on?
This is a great question. I think, there's a lot of things that climbers could be working on, pro or not. Like, I think obviously the most obvious one is just showing our respect for one another, and we're all climbing for the same reasons, and we're all passionate about our sport, and we want our sport to have a healthy environment for newcomers to feel welcome to. And I think if there's negativity online or offline, like, that's gonna really hurt our sport as a whole and not just these individuals. So I think, just making sure that we as a community and individuals can kind of bring positivity, whether that's just stoke at the cliff or paying respect to our fellow climbers.
Well, like one thing that I always kind of wonder is like, how do we kind of promote diversity and celebrate diversity? And it's a hard thing to work through because everyone is different, and you just really, I think the most important thing is to be respectful, which is like what you were talking about. As a pro climber yourself, thousands of people are looking up to you, new climbers, young climbers. How do you take on social media and your public persona, and how do you make sure that you are a positive influence to others?
It's tough. It's like, I think a lot of, once you kind of have a bigger audience, and like, I'm aware that there are thousands of people that are going to read my posts or see something that I post. I am cautious of making sure that, I'm not offending anyone, or I want to bring positivity to what we're all doing. Like, I don't want to create, I don't necessarily think that I don't want to create controversy, but you do need to be a role model, like, to be a professional in any sport, you have to be a role model, and you have to be aware that there are little kids looking up to you, and anything that you do or say may be taken out of context, or just, you got to look at it from a different point of view than just your own. And I think often pro climbers, they're already living in a bubble, and I think it's easy to kind of get caught up in that and stuck in that bubble. And you don't really look at, like, the young girl or boy who's just starting climbing, or maybe their parents who are considering getting them into climbing, or whoever it may be, like, you gotta take a step back sometimes and just kind of look at how you're being, how you're, I don't know. I'm losing my words.
It's getting warm in here. Yeah. So let's imagine you're at like a climbing gym clinic. You're talking to a group of 8 to 12-year-old new climbers. What advice would you give to them? Okay,
I think the best advice that I could give a new climber is that they need to push themselves, and they need to get out of their comfort zone, and they need to, really find something that motivates them and that they can try hard on, and not focus so much on maybe the goal in the end, and just kind of more get used to the experience of trying hard and just putting yourself out there for failure, whether that's on your hardest grade or something that you've done, and you know you can do. Like, it doesn't matter the grade or the goal. Just get out of your comfort zone and push yourself. And I think if you do that, you'll find a lot of joy in the moments when you do push through, and you'll start to get, you'll get hooked for the right reasons, I think, in that sense.
Final question.
All right.
It's a big one.
All right.
What's one thing about you that most people don't know?
One thing about me, I think the first thing that comes to mind is that I love to play tennis. And
Interesting.
I've been playing. I hurt my finger last year. I didn't climb for 3 months, and I literally played tennis 5 or 6 days a week, and now I'm completely hooked, and I'll go play this afternoon.
Do you play singles, doubles? Do you do it all?
I play mostly singles just because I don't know that many people that play tennis, but it's fun. It's like a good active recovery from climbing, and just good to do something else every once in a while.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Matty Hong. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, that's the conclusion of the show. Hope you all enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And please help us get the word out by telling a friend or leaving a rating and review. Theme music was provided by Small Houses at smallhouses.band. I want to thank Heather Widener and Matty Hong for their time. From everyone at Climbing Magazine and myself, thanks for listening. See you at the next Basecamp.